Folks, you're with Tacitus today at your Pushback channel, and thank you for joining this audio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about an issue that I'm seeing more and more of on the news, and in the more radical sort of leftist globalist, we need to socially re-engineer the world type media, is an increasing acceptance of euthanasia. Now, euthanasia is fairly recent, I guess, but excuse me, certainly in modern terms. But euthanasia for the the aged and desperately infirm, or those in say advanced stages of cancer with no chance of recovery and they're in great pain, that sort of thing, they should be. Or some may say they should have an option under very strict and supervised conditions, that they have an option of euthanasia. So I see that in the overall architecture of these things that they should have a place, but again under the most strict guidelines and supervisions, and with incorruptible public officials presiding. Now, I don't know if that level of scrutiny and incorruptibility is even possible, but there's an argument for people in those advanced stages of great pain where there is no remedy, where those sort of things could be considered. As you can probably tell, the way I mentioned it, I do so with reluctance, only because I believe if it's allowed, it'll then be horribly abused. Someone wants to get rid of old mum just so they can get their hands on the house or something like that. But anyway, now, I'm also one of the ones that believes there is a place for abortion. I think when an 11-year-old black girl from the projects gets pregnant, that is a case for considering abortion. So that's my view. I don't have a horse in either race, by the way. Or I'm not old enough yet, and definitely not infirm, so I don't have a horse in that race either. Or maybe not for now. Maybe in the future I will. But the thing that euthanasia is now morphed into something else, then something else again. So euthanasia is an option for people to just consider they don't really want to be alive anymore. Maybe they're in a state of deep depression, or they're in such a state of temporary despair that they think this is a way out, so it's moved into that, and it's also moved now into another stage where I've noticed some polls around. I think there's one in Canada recently where people who have no, they're homeless, they own nothing, and they've sort of got nothing. They've got no job, they've got no life, they've got no stake of any description in society, and maybe they've got mental health issues as well, that they should be euthanized. Now, under what conditions and what safeguards? The thing that sort of surprised me is that the mere fact that they're homeless and have nothing is in itself enough to justify, in the eyes of some of these people being polled, is enough to justify euthanasia. So what do? How would that work? Do a bunch of goons come around and grab you? Do you own anything, buddy? You don't? Okay, off to the euthanasia clinic for you. But I don't want to go. Too fucking bad. And off they go. Where are the safeguards here? Why is this acceptable? Now, it's like the mass migration thing, and the wealthier people I talk to, they're all for mass migration until it affects them, and suddenly they don't want it anymore, or don't like it. As long as I own property, but the other guy doesn't, it's okay if you euthanize him, but don't come anywhere near me. So you go back to that guy who owns the house a year later. He's been divorced. He doesn't own property anymore. What are you going to do? Take him out the back and kill him for that? So really, where does euthanasia go? But the idea, the way it's heading, is that the most demonized sections of society are the ones that should be euthanized. It comes down to that. Or it's heading in that direction, rather. Now, given the unrelenting demonization campaign of straight white males, they're all fascists and Nazis and white supremacists, and anyone who questions globalization is Hitler and that sort of stuff. Given that constant demonization, and the fact now, like with the January 6th thing that showed us that there's one law for people that don't agree with globalization or its wider structure. And there's another law for people who do agree with it. So if you're contributing to the destabilization of Western society, you're a transgender black lesbian, then you're fine. But if you oppose that destabilization process, then you're a Nazi and you're a damn white supremacist and so on. So white supremacists, the government would just declare you're a Nazi without any proof or definition of what a Nazi is or how you came to be one. You watched Tucker Carlson on Fox News last year, motherfucker. You're a Nazi. We can take you out the back and euthanize you. But once you start once you start demonizing people and taking away their basic legal rights and eradicating due legal process, like reversing the burden of proof and these sort of things, you demonize people to a point where it becomes acceptable to kill them. Now, we've learned some lessons from this in all the totalitarian regimes of the 20th century. Doesn't matter whether it was the mass murder of Jews in Europe or it was the mass murder of farmers and landholders and the so-called bourgeoisie in the Soviet Union, or the massacre of intellectuals in Cambodia and China and these sorts of things. In Cambodia, they brought out this law that if you wore glasses, you looked intellectual, therefore they had to kill you because you were somehow not communist enough. Just that you needed glasses. You looked intellectual. That's how bad it gets in totalitarian societies, and we're fast heading that way in the West. The globalists have to have a totalitarian sort of system if they're going to implement the globalist project. That they can't do it without a totalitarian system, so they must have it. And white people are the biggest obstacle, and so getting rid of them is the quickest path that the globalists would see it, the quickest path to getting the globalist project in place and making sure there's no disagreement with the globalist project or towards it. So the demonization of white. Now, once you go down that path of demonization and say, well, there are different laws for them, they don't have legal rights, they don't deserve legal rights because they're Nazis. Nazis don't deserve legal rights. So once you go down that path, then the next step is arbitrary arrest and detention. Well, they're kind of already doing that with January 6th and other. You're seeing it already around the place, the arbitrary arrest and detention, whether they use some bullshit false flag or just assert. It was an insurrection. It was an insurrection. Therefore, these people have no legal rights, that type of stuff. Once you go down that path and continue down it, which we are right now, the next step of killing people, whether it be under the guise of euthanasia, we're just euthanizing enemies of the state. We're euthanizing enemies of the people. Once you go down that path, this is where you go. And it doesn't take long to get there. And whether you look at like the French Revolution and the Committee for Public Safety, as they called it, where they were just arbitrarily detaining people, going in bullshit kangaroo courts, then taking them out the back and cutting their heads off, Madame Guillotine. And it's the same again in Cambodia and China and the Soviet Union. Mass murder on a grand scale, millions and millions of people murdered, all because they are believed to not have the right views or the right thoughts or the right beliefs. So, but the methodology is the same: demonize, take away legal rights, arbitrary arrest, no due legal process. That's all you need to do. Now we're pretty much already there. The law, your standard legal rights that they are already very, very shaky these days. Due legal process gone. Look at the way they're treating Donald Trump, for goodness sakes. There's no problem getting an activist judge and stacking a jury to these people. And by the way, they're virtuous in doing so because we're getting fucking Nazis. We're allowed to do. We're allowed to break any law, stack any jury, corrupt any judge, do whatever we want in pursuit of our totalitarian goals. Now, this is very scary, of course, but I think we're only one step, two steps away from just arbitrarily killing straight white males who don't agree with globalization or question it or have known to question it. Yeah, 25 years ago, you made a posting on some sort of computer gaming website, and you said that you didn't like globalization. But I was only 13 years old at the time. Who gives a fuck? You're a damn fucking Nazi, and that's it. Off to the soil and green processing unit for you. And so I think we're very close to that, and no one seems to want to pull back. I don't see that there should be people screaming from the rooftops about the rule of law and due legal process. It's been degraded to a point where it's barely standing up, and I don't see any champions. I don't see it has any champions, but we need champions. We need it now. We need it desperately now, because I think we're not far away from a situation where we have globalist controlled, state sanctioned euthanasia, and I'll use that term in inverted commas, of people who don't agree with globalization. You've been a Tacitus today, your Pushback channel, and thank you for listening.